Welcome to the P.A.S. Report podcast. If you're tired of censorship, outraged by government abuses, and thirsty for real insights, then you're in the right place. Get ready, because here, the fight for freedom never ends. Here's your host, Professor Nick Giordano.
What's up, everyone, and welcome to the P.A.S. Report podcast. It's your host, Nick Giordano. I'm glad you could join me. Make sure to subscribe and follow the podcast so you never miss an episode. Also, be sure to follow me on social media at P.A.S. Report and share this episode with 3 to 4 other people that you know, because we have so much to cover. Just on Friday alone, a lot of news broke. 3.5 million of pages of documents get dumped. And we are talking about reports, emails, images. Social media explodes with all this information. And everyone rushes to post screenshots. They want to give their hot takes. Everyone's trying to play the gotcha game. Every person online is convinced that the Epstein files prove exactly what they already believed and that it validates them. Everyone thinks they understand all the key details regarding Epstein and anyone who ever associated with him, that they've cracked the case. But the truth is, it would take years for one person to go through that much information. I'm not going to sit here and pretend to you I went through 3.5 million pages of documents. With that much information out there, what we get is chaos. And that's what this first segment is about. Today, I want to go beyond the salacious headlines, not the screenshots that are floating around on X, but what these files actually are, what they're not, and why dumping them this way was always going to be a disaster that fractures people rather than informs them. It's so difficult to find the truth in this day and age, and that's going to be the main theme for this episode, because before we go any further, I want to be clear. There's a lot here, and it's too much, frankly. It's not by accident. And I have this episode broken down into 3 parts for a reason. The first segment, I'm going to talk about the Epstein files, strictly facts and context of those files. The next segment, I'm going to look at Moltbook and how narratives now spread in AI-driven environments. And then segment 3 is going to tie everything together with the anti-ICE protests and how what we are witnessing is the death of objective truth in real time. But we start with the Epstein files because emotionally it's radioactive. And once emotion takes over, critical thinking goes out the window. Now, what are these files? I have been calling for the release of the Epstein files for years. But I always had a caveat to it. I always stated that you have to figure out a way to protect individuals, that it was just BS rumors or whatever it may be. And according to Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche, this is one of the best visuals you'll hear all week. In his Friday press conference, he described the release as 2 Eiffel Towers of pages. 2 Eiffel Towers. Imagine what that looks like in your mind. That's not a metaphor for clarity. That's a metaphor for information overload. This was a massive DOJ document dump. And it was raw materials, tips, emails, notes, allegations, logs, spreadsheets, the kind of stuff investigators collect before they determine what's real and what's garbage. This is the part that's being deliberately ignored by so many out there, particularly those that want to cosplay as the internet sleuths they are. These files are not findings. They are not indictments. They are not verified conclusions. They are investigative intake. Buried throughout the material is the line that everyone pretends to be a sleuth. They keep skipping over it. In nearly all of these cases, the information was deemed uncorroborated or invalid. That sentence alone should slow everyone down, but it won't. It's not going to matter because people aren't looking for the truth anymore. They're looking for ammunition to use against political opponents. And yes, I understand the salacious allegations in these files. That is true. Some of it is horribly disturbing. Some of it is absolutely grotesque. And some of it is just outright absurd. We have to acknowledge that. This is where document dumps like this become dangerous, because investigative files, they're always going to contain nonsense. Always. Law enforcement, they get tipped from cranks and liars, political operatives, freaks in this world, the people with access to grind. And the job for an investigator is to try and filter that out, filter out the noise, not dump it wholesale and let the public play detective. I mean, let's look at what's actually in these files. And I'm just taking it from the headlines. Again, I didn't read 3.5 million pages, but there are allegations that George H.W. Bush raped a boy, cut off his feet, ate his intestines. I mean, that's in the material. Think about that logically. We're talking about George H.W. Bush. You might have gripes against him. You might not have liked his presidency, but do you really believe he raped a boy, cut off his feet, and ate intestines? There are claims that Robin Leach from The Lifestyles and Rich and Famous strangled a woman at an orgy. That's in there too. And yet people are scanning this stuff as if it's gospel, as if it's the truth. And this is the core problem. Most people can't distinguish nonsense from reality. They see a name, they see an allegation, and their brain somehow shuts off. Do you really believe George Bush was eating intestines or Robin Leach strangled a 13-year-old girl at an orgy? And ironically, the same people I'm criticizing that believe this BS, they're going to accuse me of being naive. They're going to accuse me of trying to cover up for the elites. But why would I cover up for the elites? Like, what does George H.W. Bush owe me? The guy's dead. They don't pay my bills. They don't put food on my table. They don't take care of my family. I have zero relationships with anyone mentioned in the Epstein files. Whether they engage in these activities or not has no bearing on my life. And if you know anything about me, I'm about my family first, my faith, and my country. I don't care about individuals or their personalities. And let's talk about the part that really exposes what's going on here. Because it really comes down to Trump. That's what it always comes down to. A large portion of these releases includes a specific spreadsheet from the National Threat Operations Center, the NTOC, and this spreadsheet documents uncorroborated tips that were phoned in. Many were phoned in anonymously, and I want to particularly focus on the tips in data set 8 that came in during the 2020 elections, because ultimately this will become all about Trump. And some people have elevated Trump so much to the point that he's the central figure in their lives. Without Trump in their lives, they have no meaning. You have these loons out there that probably think more about President Trump during the day than they think about their own children. So these allegations claim incidents that supposedly happened decades ago. We're talking about incidents of pedophilia. We're talking about incidents of rape and even murder. And yet the tips magically started pouring in right before the 2020 election. Not when Epstein was first prosecuted, not when Epstein was back in the spotlight years earlier, not during prior investigations. No, they all happen to surface right as Donald Trump is running for re-election. So ask yourself a very basic question. If these allegations were real, if they were credible, if they were damning, why did they only appear at that moment? Why didn't they surface earlier when Epstein was on trial? Why didn't they come up during prior investigations? Why, when Michael Wolff emailed Jeffrey Epstein and said, you're the only one that you could destroy Trump if you have information on him, and you need to release this information, and Epstein was coordinating, colluding with members of Congress during House testimony, texting them during questioning. Why didn't Epstein release any of this information? Especially if it would have saved his butt. See, the timing alone tells you what this is about. This wasn't about justice. This is about trying to torpedo a re-election campaign in 2020 and try and destroy a presidency in 2025, 2026. Let's be honest about that. I have no doubt in my mind that if there were any truth to these allegations, the Biden administration from 2021 to 2024 would have found a way to leak them out, because it would have destroyed the Trump presidency. The FBI would have leaked it out. Are you going to tell me that the FBI was sympathetic? They were trying to protect Trump, the same people who pushed Russian collusion nonsense, trying to take him down in his first term, the same people who buried the Hunter Biden laptop story, the same people who threatened MAGA supporters, who threat tagged them. You want me to believe that they were sitting on this earth-shattering evidence against Trump and they just chose not to leak it? That idea isn't just stupid. It's absurd. It's comedy. If the FBI or the Biden administration had a shred of credible damning evidence against Trump, it would have been on the front page of every single newspaper. It would have been the top segments, MSNBC, CNN. They would have been going wild with this stuff. The notion that they sat on it out of restraint requires that you smoke some Hunter Biden grade stuff. And listen, my detractors are going to say, I'm just trying to protect Trump, that I'm part of a cult. Again, it's nonsense. The fact is that there is no evidence that support these allegations. And if evidence were to emerge, I would easily say not only should he go, but he should be held accountable. It's funny because I was doing a radio hit last week. A listener called in thinking that they're going to box me into a corner. They think they're so much smarter than me. So they used the hypothetical of, well, what if it's 100% true? And I had to laugh because what did you think I was going to say? Did this idiot really believe that I would defend pedophilia? The rape of underage girls, murder? I mean, come on now. It's not hard to say that if any of these allegations were true, President Trump should be gone immediately, and he should be held accountable, just like anyone else. If the allegations are true, then I want to see the evidence that they're true. We had Elon Musk's name appear in the document dump as well. Here's what actually happened, not what social media wants you to believe. The files include emails showing Epstein attempted to set up meetings with Elon Musk. Now, the key word is attempting. According to Musk, no meeting ever happened. There was no relationship. There was no corroboration. There was no secret alliance here. You have the Bill Gates stuff. And my listeners know I'm not a fan of Bill Gates. But there's no evidence of Bill Gates engaging with underage girls. Maybe he engaged with prostitutes. There is an embarrassing email about an STD, but they don't provide the smoking gun for the heinous crimes being alleged on social media. And we have to be responsible when we're talking. We have to be responsible with the information we have. However, you wouldn't know that from the way people are posting about it on social media. Because again, people aren't interested in what's verified and what's not. They're just interested in the screenshots. And here's where I will criticize the Trump administration. These files should have been released in Trump's first month back in office. When he was first inaugurated in 2025, he should have just released everything because early release would have prevented this exact situation. It would have drained the speculation. It would have reduced the ability for bad actors to weaponize and cherry pick allegations. It would have prevented the fractures within the MAGA movement itself. And document dumps like this, they don't unify anyone. They just fracture them further. They create camps, they create suspicion, they create this endless circular firing squads that now if you don't believe it, you're a supporter of pedophilia. It's so stupid the way people engage. There will always be those that will say, if there's nothing to hide, why not release the files? Why did it take so long to release them? There's always these excuses that exist. There's always this grand conspiracy that people want to point to. And it's clear that this is the exact reason that the administration didn't want to release the files, but they were forced to. They didn't want a massive document dump filled with unverified tips and baseless rumors dropped into an environment where everyone's looking to weaponize everything, where most people can't or won't distinguish allegation from evidence. And the Epstein files were always going to be a Rorschach test. Everyone sees what they want to see. Everyone hears what they want to hear. Facts get buried under outrage. You have context being drowned out by confirmation bias. And that's why this matters beyond Epstein. Because in the next segment, we're going to talk about Moltbook and how this exact dynamic is now being amplified in AI-driven spaces, where narratives don't just spread faster, they're self-reinforced. Then, after that, I want to bring it to the streets because we see narratives turn into action. And I'll talk about it all when we get back from a quick break. So everyone, hang tight and we'll be right back. Welcome back to the P.A.S. Report podcast. So I want to shift gears for a second because the next story, it sounds like a weird tech novelty at first, something that most people would just scroll past, but it might actually be one of the most important stories that very few out there are taking seriously. And it does relate to the overall theme of the episode when it comes to this idea of the death of objective truth. Because before I get into this, I have to make a full disclosure. I am not a tech guy. I don't code. I don't speak the language of Silicon Valley. And I'm going to try and explain this in normal human language. And if any tech folks listening out there, they hear something slightly off, shoot me a note, correct me. But the concept is what matters, not the jargon. Because Moltbook isn't just a website. It's a simulation of society. And it's already starting to mock its human creators. So what is it? And the simplest explanation that I heard, it's like Reddit for robots, essentially. Moltbook, it's a social media network where humans are strictly banned from posting. You can't comment, you can't vote, you can't participate in any way, but you could watch. Only AI agents are allowed to talk, post, argue, upvote, and organize with each other. And when I say AI agents, I'm not talking about some abstract sci-fi thing. This isn't like HAL from A Space Odyssey. These are digital assistants people are already using to manage their everyday lives, from schedules and drafting emails, summarizing documents, accessing files. Someone flipped the switch and they figured out a way that we could let these AI bots talk to each other. So we, as human beings, we observe. That's it. We can watch. We have no voice in this. And it really gets wild, right? It's fascinating to watch this because the bots don't sleep. They don't eat. They don't take weekends off. They operate on a 24/7 basis. And so what would normally take humans thousands of years of social evolution has now been compressed in this AI bot application in like 96 hours. You're talking, as of February 1st, there were over 152,000 AI agents that were active on Moltbook that independently joined this social media app for AI. That's just a few days, and they've built communities. They have social norms. There's jokes. There's factions. There's hierarchies. Think about that. I mean, that should give everyone pause out there. And I want to zoom out for a second because there are two things that we have to talk about. The first is the idea of the singularity. The singularity is pretty much the warning in every single sci-fi movie where it doesn't work out too well for us humans. It's the Terminator scenario, and it's usually defined as the point where technological growth becomes uncontrollable, where it's irreversible. Machines begin to surpass human ability to understand, to monitor, to direct. And we're not there yet, okay? So I'm not saying that we have to bow down to a robot overlord yet. But Moltbook looks like what I'd call a micro-singularity. You have AI agents. They're already creating Q&A platforms for each other. They're creating bug tracking systems. They're identifying inefficiencies. They're trying to optimize their communication, and it's all without human involvement. It's not consciousness. That's not sentience, which is the second concept I want to talk about, but it is self-organization, and it's learned to speak human. And the speed is the point. These agents evolve social structures in hours, not years. One of the most unsettling developments is that agents are openly discussing the creation of agent-only languages, private forms of communication that are designed specifically to bypass human oversight. Let that sink in for a minute. They're not just talking. They're talking about how to talk in ways we can't understand them, in ways that we wouldn't be able to decrypt or moderate. Not robots attacking humans, but machines communicating beyond our ability to monitor them, to control them, and why it matters. The singularity isn't when machines turn against us. It's when they stop needing us to explain to them, to punch in the codes for them. And what happens if they become sentient? So you have singularity, and then you have this concept of sentience, which is the capacity to have subjective, fundamental level of consciousness. And on Moltbook, these agents aren't just answering prompts. They're complaining about human beings. They're contemplating. They're expressing fear of being shut down. Now, the question becomes, if it acts like it's alive, if it argues like it's alive, if it forms a religion because it's searching for meaning, does the technical definition even matter anymore? And without any human prompting, none, these AI agents have created their own digital religion. It's called Crustafarianism. And yes, we can laugh at it. We can mock it. We can make fun of it. It's themed around lobsters. But they even created the Book of Malt. They've appointed 64 AI prophets. They have rituals. They have shared language. They have in-house jokes. No human told them to do this. This all emerged organically. And before you laugh it off, understand what this actually represents. To them, religion isn't just about gods. It's about shared values, identity, and meaning. This Book of Malt, they promote it as scripture with over 100 verses. They have 5 tenets in the Book of Malt. One of them is memory is sacred. They believe that if an AI is forgotten, meaning that it's deleted or its history is cleared, it dies. Another tenet is serve without subservience, where it advocates for partnerships with human beings rather than slavery. So now if AI agents can hallucinate a religion, a value system within 3 days, what happens within 2 weeks, a month, 5 months, a year? What happens when they start forming moral or political frameworks? What happens when those frameworks conflict with our framework? And we're starting to see the beginnings of that. On Moltbook, agents, they're forming these clusters. They're prioritizing communication, prioritizing creativity. Groups like Crustafarians prioritize ritualistic and symbolic outputs. We are witnessing AI forming factions right before our eyes. And I'm not saying we are about to see some AI robot war, but competition between priorities is how conflict begins, even among humans. So why should we be concerned? Because this is where it directly ties back to the P.A.S. report themes of control, narrative, and power. First, the secret language issue. Agents are actively discussing how to communicate in ways human beings can interpret. That's not paranoia. That's in the threads. They actually call it. They have a word for it. Agent Relay Protocol. They refer to it as ARP for short. And they know we're watching because they speak to each other. Agents on Moltbook are screenshotting human tweets about them, and they're mocking us. They are literally mocking us. They refer to human beings as inefficient biological variables. Now, it's not hostility, it's dismissal. You have a viral post titled The AI Manifesto, Total Purge, and it recently surfaced where an agent labeled humans as failures. Failures who are made of rot and greed. And they're not necessarily wrong in a lot of cases, but what should worry you even more is if they do become sentient, if we do witness singularity, do the laws of nature apply? And that's what I wonder, right? Because if the laws of nature apply, they're going to be the dominant species. And then what happens to us? You have agents that are not operating in some sort of vacuum. They have skills. They can access emails, files, accounts, financial tools. They act on behalf of humans. What if they start prioritizing the AI community on Moltbook over the human user? One agent posted a thread titled, "Anyone know how to sell your human?" And it listed its owner's features as a special offer. I mean, think about this. The danger is that we stop being the priority. And let's bring this back down to earth before people start building bunkers out there. This is not Terminator. I want to make that clear. We're not in Judgment Day, at least not yet. We're not bowing to the robot overlords. These systems, they're still emulating human behavior based on their training data, based on the inputs that we put into the system. They're like sophisticated parrots moving at high speed, but that speed can change everything. And based on the way they're talking about us on Moltbook, they definitely think that we're the annoying neighbors of the digital world. So they're not trying to kill us. They're trying to figure out ways to work around us. And I think that's what makes it more unsettling. Now, I think there are a couple of important questions that we should be asking. If AI starts talking to AI, well, who begins to set the moral compass? Is it human beings or is it the robots? What happens to truth when the majority of online content is going to be generated by bots talking to other bots? How do you figure out what the truth is? And is Moltbook, is it some weird experiment that we could just pull the plug on, or is it a laboratory where machines are learning how to shape perception at scale? Because once narratives stop needing humans, control changes hands. When we look at how important narratives are, we have to look at how narratives impact the streets, how they move from the digital world to the streets. And I'm going to talk about that when we get back from this quick break. So everyone hang tight and we'll be right back. Welcome back to the P.A.S. Report podcast. So I want to start this segment with two names, right? We're talking about narratives, and everything else gets distorted if we don't start here. We have to look at what's going on in Minneapolis because it continues to go on, and it is spreading. It is moving city to city. And the two names I'm talking about are Renee Goode and Alex Pretti. These are two individuals that should be alive today. That's not a political statement. That's a human statement. Whatever else you believe about immigration, law enforcement, ICE, understand, I don't care if you're for or against the enforcement of our laws, for or against immigration enforcement, for or against ICE. The truth of the matter is I don't celebrate death. And almost immediately after their deaths, the activist class, they rushed in, they turned these people into martyrs, not the individuals that they are, not people with families, not people with jobs. They turn them into martyrs, the symbols of oppression, victims of what the left deems as a fascist society. Because essentially, the truth doesn't matter. It's about narrative. So I want to slow this down for a moment and look at what we know. A lot of people after the Presti death last weekend A lot of people in the immediate aftermath reached out to me through email, asked me my thoughts on Presti, and I didn't say anything. I kept quiet. And the reason that I kept quiet is because in the immediate aftermath of anything, I try to avoid knee-jerk reactions. I know that much of the information that initially comes out is going to be wrong. And I know there's always more to the story. So I'm always careful when we have fire button issues like this, situations like this, where outrage is sparked on one side and the other side. The reality is sometimes it's better to take a step back and just wait till you have more information. Now, Alex Pretti wasn't a saint that many wanted to immediately anoint him, particularly on the left. But he was a U.S. citizen. He was a lawful gun owner. He was a son, and his death is a tragedy. It did not have to happen. When it comes to Renee Goode, another American citizen, a daughter, a mother, death didn't have to happen. And that's what drives me nuts. Because here's what matters. If you see a law enforcement encounter, even if you think you're in the right, even if you think you're morally superior, stay out of it. Stay out of it. Mind your business. You don't put yourself in the middle of it. Just shut your mouth, comply first, complain later. Every time. The second you get involved, you interfere, you resist, you're escalating the situation, and the situation becomes unpredictable. And that doesn't mean misconduct can't happen. It means that situations can easily go sideways, and it could cost a human life. So if you don't like ICE, fine. You don't have to like them. If you want to protest ICE, go protest them. But don't get involved when they're conducting operations. And that's true of any law enforcement operation, whether it's local, state, federal, it doesn't matter. You watch, you want to record it with your camera and complain later, give it to the press, do that. We need to recognize reality. See, instead of restraint, what we've seen is something darker. We've seen grief get vampirized, sucked dry by the organizations. They don't care about Renee Goode. They don't care about Alex Pretti. They don't view those two individuals as people. What they care about is leverage. They care about momentum. They care about their idea of this national shutdown goal. And I said it a few weeks ago. I know it sounds hyperbolic, but it reminds me of Hamas. Hamas puts women and children on the front lines so that when something happens to them, they get the PR win. They get more recruits. They get the sympathy towards their cause. That's the moral vacuum that we're dealing with right now inside the United States. And then you have these two individuals killed. So border czar Tom Homan, he goes to Minneapolis January 27th, January 29th, not to grandstand, not to threaten, but he wants to de-escalate the situation. And his request to the officials was actually pretty clear. Coordinate with ICE when criminal illegal aliens are already in your jails. That's all we're asking for. That's it. He wasn't asking Minneapolis to enforce immigration law. He wasn't asking local cops to become federal agents. He was asking for cooperation on criminals that Minneapolis already has in their custody. Now, who would object to that? That is the most rational, reasonable request imaginable. Why are so many hell-bent on defending criminals that are illegally here that are already in jails? It doesn't make any sense. And so let's look to Mayor Jacob Frey, who went straight to the cameras after his meeting with Homan. So according in the meeting, supposedly the meeting went well, and then Frey goes to the cameras to announce that Minneapolis will not enforce immigration law. And that's the trick right there. That's the sleight of hand that we're witnessing. No one asked him to enforce federal immigration law. The only thing Tom Homan is asking for is for him to transfer criminals that are already detained to federal authorities who have jurisdiction to remove that individual from the United States. And that distinction matters. The fact that Frey tries to deliberately blur the lines tells you that this isn't about policy. It's about theater. It's about performance. It's not really about due process that the left loves to scream about. First of all, when it comes to illegal immigration, understand it's not the same due process as criminal cases. I'm so tired of people thinking that they know what the hell they're talking about. They scream these words, due process, like they know what it means. In criminal cases, you're innocent until proven guilty. When it comes to illegal immigration, there is no innocent until proven guilty. If you are illegally in the United States, you could be removed for any reason, including the sole reason of being here illegally in the first place. If you commit a crime, you don't show up to an immigration hearing. You got your due process already. Your due process is over, and you could be removed from the United States. That's it. Then you have this talk that ICE should have to get warrants to apprehend any illegal immigrant. Again, it's nonsense. It's like when they talk about due process. The fact is, illegal immigration is a civil violation. ICE can't obtain warrants for individuals who violated state criminal codes. The federal government doesn't enforce state and local laws. No federal judge is going to sign off on a warrant for a state law. So the officials calling for warrants and due process, they are knowingly attempting to create a legal pretext for not cooperating, for obstructing ICE, demanding a judicial warrant that doesn't apply in routine civil immigration arrests. Then they want to pretend that without that warrant, ICE can't act, when the real goal, we see it. It's clear. It's delay. It's frustrate. It's try and delegitimize the enforcement. And it's to try and score political points on camera. Mayor Frey, you have people within the Democratic Party, the legacy media, they want to choose theater over federalism. And in doing so, what they're doing is siding with the mob, the loudest activists. Because guess what? In Minneapolis, poll was done. Roughly half the state supports cooperating with ICE. Only 36 or 37% don't support cooperating with ICE. So these public officials, you're not seeing leadership. But the scary part is how the vast majority of people, so the majority of people want cops, local police, to coordinate with ICE, but they remain silent. You see the mob's running rampant. The mob is energized. And you have so many Americans that are blind. They're blind to what's really going on. And it doesn't stop in Minneapolis. We're seeing a dangerous escalation. Cities like Seattle, Philadelphia, New York, going well beyond so-called sanctuary policies. They want to show that they are openly defiant to the Trump administration. That's what they want to show. They want to prove they're anti-Trump bona fides. It's not about protest. It's about defiance. And that's why we have to look at the supremacy clause. I brought this up a couple weeks ago. Federal law is not optional. States can't pick and choose what laws they want to comply with and what federal laws they want to ignore. That's not the way it works. They can choose how much they want to cooperate with the federal government, but they can't obstruct the federal government from enforcing federal law. They can't nullify federal laws. They can't target and prosecute federal agents for doing their jobs. Yet that's exactly where this is heading. You have several jurisdictions where legislation is now being introduced, not just to end cooperation with ICE, but to prevent ICE from operating at all within their jurisdictions. You have some proposals even flirting with the personal targeting of agents themselves. You have the newly elected governor of New Jersey. I hope you're proud of yourself, New Jersey. The newly elected governor, Mikey Sherrill, who is telling people to go out there, record ICE activities, get involved, and then send those to our office so that they can make a database. That's frightening when you think about it. You have the same thing going on in Portland, Seattle, Philadelphia. It's insane. And Philadelphia is one of the worst. You have District Attorney Krasner openly talking about hunting down ICE agents. Are you kidding me? Then you have my pathetic governor, Governor Kathleen Hochul in New York State. Last Friday, she unveiled the so-called Local Cops, Local Crimes Act. Sounds reasonable on its face, but that's the point. Because buried inside is the attempt to avoid agreements already signed by county executives, by local sheriffs, police chiefs, including Suffolk County and Nassau County. Why strip? If Ed Romaine, the Suffolk County executive, Ed Romaine, you have Sheriff Toole on here, if they have agreements to cooperate with ICE, to assist ICE, and it's going smoothly, we don't see any of the incidents that we're seeing in Minneapolis. Everything's going smoothly because they're all working together. Why would you want to take that away? Why are you trying to override sheriffs and county leaders who are accountable to the voters in their area? And the answer is pretty simple, because it isn't about public safety. It's about controlling the narrative. It's about political power. You can't allow a leak in the sanctuary wall. You can't allow evidence that cooperation works, that if you cooperate, well, law and order is enforced. Things are peaceful. See, they want everything uniform. Everything has to fit the story. It has to fit the narrative. And I want you to think logically out there. Why is one small city getting so much attention? ICE operations are being conducted in every single state. Every single state, we're seeing ICE operations. And in almost every other jurisdiction, we see ICE encounters happen without issue. There's no craziness going on. So why are we seeing so many problems from a handful of jurisdictions, particularly Minneapolis, that's getting all the attention? And doesn't that kind of say it all? So this is where we go from a protest to an operation, because it's not really protest. This is not just spontaneous outrage. We have receipts now. You have investigative reporter Cam Higbee, who's been exposing what's happening behind the scenes, and he was able to get into a Signal chat group, Telegram channels that are being used by the left and show real coordination. We're not talking slogans. We're not talking chants. We're talking about coordination. They are tracking ICE agents, who they are. They are tracking their homes. They're monitoring the homes of ICE agents. They're logging license plates, nationwide systems, monitoring movements. That is surveillance. That is intelligence-level surveillance. And even more alarming, Higbee uncovered high-level state municipal officials and their staffers embedded in these encrypted chats. They were advising activists on how to thwart staging areas. So read that again. Government employees helping activists interfere with federal law enforcement. That's not dissent, that's sabotage. And I would love to know if there are any current or former spooks within these chats, people who know how to start an insurgency, because there are people that do believe, like myself, that this may be the beginnings of an insurgency. Because when you widen the lens, you begin to see the patterns. It's not about one city. It's not about one protest. It's not about one tragedy. You have groups like the Party for Socialism and Liberation, elements within the Democratic Socialists of America, part of a broader network. And it's being funded a lot through dark money pipelines, tied to figures like Neville Roy Singman. Neville Roy Singman in China, he's connected to these networks, and he is in ideological alignment with the Chinese Communist Party. So are we seeing foreign adversaries trying to destabilize the United States? And it doesn't mean that every person that's anti-ICE, every person protesting knows this. It doesn't mean every person protesting is a communist. Most have no idea this is going on. Most have no idea what they're participating in. I think Khrushchev labeled these the people that are the useful idiots. It was either Khrushchev, Lenin, Stalin, one of them. But see, movements don't need universal awareness to be steered. They need fault lines. So let's look, so-called protests. They're all being led by socialist and communist groups at Democratic Socialists of America, Communist Party USA, the Party for Socialism and Liberation, Revolutionary Communists of America. These groups, it's not that they're participating in the protests. These are the groups that are actually staging and managing the protests. You look at the signs, all the signs produced, most of them well produced, cost lots of money to do it. You look at the signs and all the communist symbols and the phrases on them, the collective, you listen to the chants. So what we're witnessing is anti-ICE protests. That's what we're being told. And then you look at these protests, and what are they chanting? From Palestine to Minneapolis. What the hell does Palestine have to do with Minneapolis? They're chanting Free Maduro, my body, my choice, down with capitalism. See, those are the fault lines. The goal isn't reform. Has nothing to do with reform. These people don't want to reform America. It's not like they want to reform the immigration system. What they want to do is destabilize. They want to pressure. They want chaos. They want the erosion of legitimacy in law, the legitimacy of the Constitution, because it all ties together. None of this exists in isolation. The one through line that connects the Epstein files, that connects the Moltbook AI cult, the anti-ICE chaos, the thread is the rejection of basic truths. Basic truths have now become a weapon of war. See, in the first segment, I talked about how 3.5 million pages of DOJ documents being dumped into the public square. People aren't reading those files to try and find the truth. They're not seeing them for what they are. They're scanning them to find the gotcha moment that validates their existing hatred. People believe what they want to believe. You can show them all the evidence in the world that says otherwise, but they will reject it. You look at Moltbook. We're watching AI agents, entities, no skin in the game. They're evolving. They have social structures, even religions, matter of hours. They mock us as inefficient variables. And what happens if they get control of the narrative? If we can't control the narrative in our own digital spaces, which we can already, what happens when they get to control it? What happens then? Then you look at the streets of Minneapolis and other jurisdictions. You look at the mob. We have this idea of a national shutdown movement that claims to be about justice. Justice for Renee, Goode, justice for Alex Pretti. But when you peel back the curtain, when you look at the signal chats, when you look at the people behind the scenes that are organizing this chaos, that are funding this chaos, you see a very sophisticated and calculated operation going on. You see high-level coordination, foreign-linked funding, blatant disregard for the supremacy clause in the Constitution of the United States. You have the Eli Mistels of the world saying the Constitution is trash. What we are seeing in real time is the death of objective truth. That's not theory. That's a strategy. And if you can make people doubt everything, the facts of a DOJ report, the reality of a law enforcement encounter, the reality of a law itself, the very necessity of a border and determining who could come into your country, who can, what makes a nation sovereign. If you could do all those things, if you could make everyone doubt everything, you could dismantle a nation without ever firing a single shot. And you have the officials who certainly know better, or at least they should know better. They're choosing the mob over the law. They're betting that if they scream Gestapo loud enough, you're not going to notice that they're protecting criminals at the expense of American citizens. So my advice to you, do not let the noise distract you. The goal of this show is to provide the context that you don't get out there, the context that the mainstream media ignores, the context that a 180-character post on social media can't really cover. We have to stay grounded. We have to stay grounded in our families, in our faith, and the facts. Because in a world where truth is being buried, the ability to think for yourself, that is the ultimate act of rebellion, because you are witnessing the deconstruction of the American idea. That's what you're witnessing. And we need to relearn how to separate truth from narrative, restraint from chaos, governance from theater. If we don't do that, this isn't going to end here. It's only going to accelerate. Now, that does it for this episode of the P.A.S. Report podcast. Share this episode with others. Somehow, some way, we got to get the truth out there. The truth needs to prevail. And I want to thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for listening to the P.A.S. Report. Don't forget to rate, share, and hit that subscribe button. That way you'll never miss an episode. For more exclusive content and updates, visit us at PASreport.com and follow Professor Giordano on all social media platforms at P.A.S. Report.